Well, welcome everyone to UX and ATX. You are at a Figma workshop. We're going to be talking about auto layout tonight. I want to welcome everyone who is new to UX and ATX, even if you've maybe been to a few meetups or if you are a long time member. We welcome you. We're glad you're here. We're not really just in Austin. We're all over the place now, all over the country, and then also in multiple countries. And we are looking for folks to help us organize. We have a number of positions and committees that we're forming. So if you're interested, please join our Slack channel and reach out to us. We also have a few things on our website at uxandatx.com. And I'll share that Slack invite link if you haven't already joined. I'll put that in the chat in just a second. Also, we already have our next meetup scheduled. We're really excited to bring in a speaker who's going to be helping designers work on their personal brand, how to rock your personal brand on social media. So this is really designed to help you with putting yourself out there in the world. Just went up on Meetup today, so you can go ahead and get scheduled, and we'll have it on all of our other platforms as well. That one's going to be January 17th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Central. So look forward to seeing you at that one. But you're not here for that. You're here to talk about Figma. And so I want to introduce our expert, Nathan Flores. He is a UX designer and he's a UX architect right now for Cox Automotive. He was Kames highly recommended. This is the guy who knows Figma, and I'm really excited to have him walk you through auto layout and show you what he has. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Nathan.
All right, I will share my screen. Also, before I do begin, I want to thank everyone for showing interest in learning auto layout and being here tonight. If you do have questions throughout, I think because of the number of people, you can either put your questions in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. But to start, welcome to the Figma workshop about learning auto layout. Today, I wanted to cover why auto layout is valuable in terms of design systems, consistency across your designs, and the beauty of auto resizing that comes with it. The goal is to teach you all things auto layout. I know you may not take away everything auto layout, but we're covering the basics. We're covering some examples and how to apply that to your design with some use cases. At the very end, I hope to showcase a finished design that's going to kind of implement some of the talking points throughout using some of those basics. And hopefully you guys do enjoy being here. I will start and say I have been using Figma auto layout well, Figma in general, I guess, for around 5 years. Auto layout from the beginning when it was released through all the updates up till present day. To start us off, I would like to walk us through some of the basics that come with auto layout. And the first thing that I would like to show you for people who are unaware, if I have text, if I have an object, it doesn't quite matter. To get you started, you need to select your object or your text and hit Shift-A. That is going to give you this panel on the right side of the UI. That is going to be everything auto layout, and you can do that both with objects or with text. We're going to start and focus in this panel by going over some of the core basics. In this frame, this is an auto layout frame. I just drug it out so it was nice and big. I've got 2 circles in the middle here. And what I wanted to show you first with auto layout is positioning. So in this panel, you can actually align, and you can see how this changes the objects. You can align all over the place. Top, center, left, right, middle, all those things. And you can also, to start us off, have spacing between those items. So as I increase this here, you can see it increases the spacing between the elements. Let's go back to 8. You can do that through typing. You could also click and drag. Both of those work. And the next thing I would like to cover is horizontal versus vertical alignment. That's through both of these arrows here. Right now they're horizontal. You can change that to vertical. And auto layout actually defaults depending on the orientation of your object. So if I have 2 squares that are already in a vertical alignment, it's smart enough to know we're going to keep them in the vertical alignment. And the same could be said if those objects were in a horizontal alignment as well. So even if they're off, you can do that and it'll place them in your auto layout frame. One thing to note as well through some of this basics is if you have 2 objects and you do select those within an auto layout frame, it defaults to whatever distance pixel-wise those are apart. So right now that was 27, and if they were closer, then that would be a smaller distance. Moving past just the alignment and the spacing, we do have padding. And padding is noted by all around the object in the container. It tells you that through these lines. So right now I have 64 pixels of padding all around. I can change, let's say, to 16 pixels, and you can see that object actually resized to fit 16 pixels instead. I could also do that with vertical or either or. But the only reason that that object actually changes size is because it is set to filling the container. That's done through this UI over here through these dropdowns. If this object had a fixed width, which all standard objects do when you place them in the frame, then if I increase or decrease this frame, I'll actually get rid of this for a second. If I shrink this frame down, it doesn't register that object changing at all. And it just looks wonky and weird. And we don't like that. We like things to be neat. So we would like to change this object to fill. And that is going to mean that you can change this padding and it will adjust it. Now I'm showing you these things with objects in first to kind of get the overall concept of what these things do. And then I can get into some examples of maybe using text or other things within a larger frame. The next thing I'd like to showcase are slightly advanced settings, is what Figma calls them, but they're basically in this little preview panel over here on the side through these 3 dots. And the first I wanted to illustrate was strokes and auto layout. So right now, I'll show you this frame. Technically, while the only object in here is a circle, it technically has 8 pixels of padding both horizontally and vertically. Now you don't see that happening here because my stroke in this frame is also 8 pixels. So there is no padding occurring here because this stroke is basically blocking out that padding. And you can see if I change that stroke instead to 16, it's just completely covering that object. What Figma incorporated was this strokes included versus excluded. And by default, they are excluded. But if you include them in the layout, then now you get your nice spacing. It basically registers that stroke as the inside of the container now, rather than on the actual borders here. So that's kind of how that one functions. That could be used in some situations where, especially with their newer update, where they actually incorporated different strokes on sides and things. So if I had a bottom stroke, maybe in like a navigation or something, and I wanted that spacing to remain the same, then I can actually include that in the layout and it'll be all nice and neat. Moving forward, I have in this frame 4 circles, and I not only want to show a stacked versus how Figma calls it, I guess, packed, but space between. Now, packed means that it is stuck between the pixels that you specified ahead of time. And that is your spacing. Here it is 8. I can make it 24. Everything is all fine there. It equals that spacing in between here. Figma also has something really cool that was fairly recent, where you can actually go into negative spacing now. So I can have these objects overlap. So maybe, I guess a use case for this would be if you have profile pictures or something, or contributors maybe in a file, and you wanted to show them overlapping, you can do that. But let's say I wanted this first circle, this blue one, to overlap the red one. Right now it's, I guess, at the back, and this one is at the top. So Figma calls that last on top, and through this canvas stacking menu, you can actually change the first on top. So now it's in this order rather than the green being on top, then the purple, and all that jazz. I will go back to last on top, and I'll actually space these out, let's say 24 pixels. A little tip that I use all the time, because I don't like to use this menu as much, they actually do have a hotkey for that auto spacing, compact to space between. They have a hotkey for this, which is selecting into this box and hitting X on your keyboard. I use that all the time. It's faster, but what this is doing is just automatically redistributing the spacing between these items to fill this frame. You can change that back by double clicking anywhere in here, or again, you can hit X and everything will go back to whatever you had originally. Figma actually incorporated these, I guess, boxes that show your padding all around these elements. And rather than using just this UI over here, they offer clicking into this box and changing maybe just one side. So you can change, maybe I want the top to have 16 pixels. I want the right to have, I don't know, 24, and so on and so forth. So you can change those individually. You can also do that through the UI, and you can change each of the sides through here. Kind of varies on preference level there. I've done both, but I tend to prefer using what's already over here. Next up in the basics, and then we can kind of get into more examples, but I will ask for some questions after this. Text alignment is something where technically in this frame, everything is center aligned, but they're not. And that's because they have awkward boxes and they're not going to be perfectly aligned, because those boxes are what is being centered, not the text. And text alignment actually centers the text, and that's done through that advanced menu again. And you can select that. Now all of our text boxes, I guess, are aligned. But the only thing to note is that since they are boxes, it's still going to register that space in this frame. I don't typically use this all too much. There are some instances where I will use it with, let's say, an icon. So if I come into my icons, throw something in here, and I had, I don't know, let's say text. I'll get rid of this because that was my system. But if I had a box that was that large, you can see that the pretty aligned. But if it was like that, then that would be an instance where I would actually come in here. Sometimes they could be off, and sometimes before I jump into an example of building something in auto layout, there's one last thing I wanted to cover in the basics, and that is through this little icon up here called absolute position. Now, everything in this auto layout frame is going to behave through the UI at the moment. Should you choose to hit this absolute position icon, this object will now behave like it is in a normal frame. So you can move this around and place it wherever you want in this frame. It does not abide by the rules of auto layout anymore. And there are some examples of when you would want this. Let's say I had like a card or maybe a slide out or something, and you want a cross in the top right corner. Well, if you drag it in your auto layout, it's stuck abiding by the rules. I can then change that to absolute position and say, hey, I want this in the top right. That will always be there. And since it does abide by generic frame rules, you do have to specify constraints. Since I put this in the top right using these, it actually changes the constraints for me. And now if I do adjust this frame, you can see that cross will stay in the top right. Before I push forward past the basics and into an example of building a card, I would like to stop, take a second. If you do have any questions so far, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to ask it in the chat. And I will try my best to answer whatever I can.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat earlier. I was just kind of waiting for a moment to share it. I'm just gonna go ahead and repost it so you don't have to scroll back through, but someone had a specific question about when they set up auto layout, like in a component and they reuse the component and then they have a hard time like editing that component with the auto layout. Like on the nav bar, I think. I don't know if you can see it there.
Where are you talking?
Oh, I just reposted the question, but the question someone had was, I used to make a nav bar list with auto layout, but the problem is I can't add another list when it's in auto layout. And they did a shift D to duplicate it, but it didn't work. So I guess they're basically using auto layout. It sounds like within a navigation bar, like as a component. And so when they go try to edit an instant of the component, they're having issues, but.
In that case, so there are some limitations with auto layout and components. I'll actually pull an example. So I actually have a search bar here. This has auto layout done with it. You can see the frame over here. I basically just specified that this text is going to fill my container, but only up to 16 pixels away from this icon. I can change this auto layout frame, but I can't change the things within it in components. So the first frame that has auto layout in your component, you can actually edit, but anything that falls below in this, so if I had these auto layouted in a different frame, in its own frame, I wouldn't actually be able to edit the specifications of that auto layout. And I can show an example. Like, let's detach this for a second. And let's say I had these in another frame of auto layout here. We'll just call this extra. If I then turn this into a component and pull out an example, I can still change some things in here on the top level between this, but any frame in between, you can still only change these few things. So you can't change orientation. You can't change anything else. I hope that answers the question. I can still change this stuff to like space between or change to 8 pixels of spacing. You're just kind of limited in what you want to.
Like you can't add another text box to that search bar. Like
you can't. This is, and that's what component variants are. This is your variant. You can't change that unless you detach that and make edits yourself, which technically any changes to that master component won't affect this anymore, but that would be how you would have to make the changes.
Yeah, so you could make more a variant if you wanted, like with a nav bar with double lists instead of just one. That's what you'd have to do, probably.
Right.
There is another question asking to show more examples of text align. I'm sorry, did I already miss that? Did you already do that?
Text align specifically?
Mm-hmm.
I can show an example. So let me pull in, I guess we'll pull in this, and we will make a filter chip. So we'll call this filter chip. Right now, I have in my own specified library, I have text over here, but I'm going to detach this for a second and show instead if my design system, or I guess this line height was different, and this may actually help too. I'll change this size to 12. I'll just make it real small. If this instead like if it has an awkward box, it's kind of hard because varying sizes of boxes occur with different size text. So let me actually, let's see if this is an easier example. They're kind of one-off scenarios. So in this situation, if the text was like this and I have this center aligned, I still want this to be up here centered with this text. I don't want it to be centered in the entire frame because this is technically centered. It's just got a weird box. This is technically centered. This would be a situation where you would use the text baseline alignment. And I would honestly say in your normal designs, if you come across something that is awkward, you can just change that yourself. But if you're pulling something like a component where you can't change that size of a box with text or things like that, and they're a little funky, you can fix that through the text baseline alignment instead. So they're kind of one-off situations, but they do occur. And I think that's kind of what it's there for.
Looks like there's another question in the chat if you want to do another one.
Sure.
When Vasudha designs a UI card, for an example, and converts it into auto layout, all the elements go one below the other, even when trying to, like, when it was grouped earlier. What would be the reason for that?
Objects go one below the other. Is that what you had said?
Yeah, Vasi, do you want to come off mute and try to explain?
Yeah, so exactly that is what I mentioned. So sometimes I create one component, not really component, like I'm grouping the element together first. For example, if I'm designing a UI card, and then I just click on the auto layout and all the elements go one below other. So I'm missing a step before converting it into auto layout.
So are you saying kind of, if I select all these, you put it in a regular group first and then auto layout?
Yeah.
And then are you saying that the order of this is weird, or?
Yeah. For example, the text can go below the image or something, like the elements will rearrange if it is side by side or something like that.
Okay. I think I know what you're saying. So if you had this in the grouping on the right.
Yeah. Yes.
And then you change it to auto layout, then it does that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I can explain that. If I take this grouping, I would recommend, so the way you have to think about auto layout is in small steps. So rather than, like, let's say you did want this text here and you wanted it next to this image, you should start with putting those two things in a frame. So these are now horizontally aligned. You can change those spacing. And if I take that whole group now and change it to an auto layout, that's going to remain there rather than changing. Auto layout doesn't recognize groups as a whole. It kind of just recognizes each of the elements. So if I did have them like that and just, even without the grouping, put it in an auto layout, it's going to move the text to fit all in one direction, because you can only have vertical or you could have horizontal. And then you have to use individual auto layout sections to specify which direction you would like those in. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then any final questions, or ready to move on to building a card?
Nothing else in the chat.
Awesome. So up next, I wanted to cover going over building a card. And I do have a final example over here that is already done with auto layout, and I can kind of show you what we're going to be working towards. In this card, we have an image, we have a chip for likes at the top, a title, a text section, some icon buttons, and then a standard button. And with this auto layout frame, I have it set to where that text increases these increase with spacing. This remains in the top right, and the image continues to grow with the frame as well. Looks crazy at the moment, but I'm going to walk you through it, and you may see it's not as difficult maybe as you thought it was going to be. Starting off with all of our elements, I know I need to start off with putting this all in a frame. This is going to be the overall card frame. I know it's all going in one. So what I'm going to do is put a frame around this, and we will call this the card. I'll give it a background too to make this a little bit easier to see, and might as well throw a stroke on it for the time. To start us off, I know I want, well, that title above the text, and I want these to do what we call filling the container. So over here in this UI at the top, I want this to fill the container because I want the text to increase and decrease in size with the container. So you can see that automatically adjusted the size. And if I continue to type here, it will always go underneath because the vertical is set to hug. Horizontally, it's set to filling the container on the sides, and vertically, it's set to hugging the text for underneath, okay? After I know I wanted those two to behave that way, I know I want this in the bottom left corner. And you know what, I'll scoot this over so that you can kind of see what I'm doing and how it's being put together. I know I want these in the bottom left corner, and I want the button on the right. So I know that's going to need its own frame. So we're going to do Shift A again, put that in auto layout. I don't want this in vertical. I would like this in horizontal. And I would also like this to fill the container because I'd like it to grow and shrink as I adjust the overall card. So I'm going to change that to fill container. And you notice that this didn't actually move. That button didn't shift over. That's because we need to use the space between rather than an actual pixel amount. And I could set that here to a pixel amount, but what you'll see is that doesn't actually increase with the container. Space between automatically adjust that sizing. Whoops, wrong one.
So Nathan, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, that there's a little question here that seems appropriate to pop in from Dina. What determines which component to use as the container? Looks like it followed the image size here.
It did actually follow the image size, and that's because my image is set to fixed. So if I had, like, I'll detach this for a second, it won't all break. If I had a smaller image, you're going to see now this sticks out the most, this button. Figma automatically jumps to hugging as soon as you set a new frame. So it's going to hug whatever is on the far outside here. And that happens to be the read more button. Before it was the image of the coffee bean. So that's kind of just where it cut off. I think that answers your question. But you can see in this frame, I guess for this card, I went back to the original card frame. I'm going to want this as a fixed width because now you can see, well, this picture isn't doing what I want it to do. This isn't growing with my card. That means I have to change this from fixed width to fill container because I want it to grow. Fill container is just grow. That's the way that I think about it. If I want it to change with everything else, it's going to be put in a fill container. Other than hug, I guess, with text for horizontal or vertically, if you want it to follow. So you could see if I change this text instead to hug, then it's no longer abiding by the rules of the frame, but it's abiding by the rules of what I assigned to the text. So it's always going to hug that text no matter how much I type. It'll always go out to the side. For this instance, we do want it to fill. And then we have the chip up here, which I know I want in the top right corner, but it's stuck up here because it's abiding by the rules of auto layout. And this is one of those instances, as I mentioned earlier, that you would want to use absolute position. And by doing that, now you have the image as the first element in this frame, and you have the chip, which I will move to the right. I'll make sure it's at the top, and I'll just shift it down a little to position it where I'd like. We are almost there with the card. The only other things that you may notice is this one has rounded corners and some padding between all of these elements on the sides. Now, I'm gonna do something that is wrong first so you can see what happens with auto layout. Let's say I wanted 8 pixels of padding on the side. Well, if I take the whole card container and give it 8 pixels of padding, you can see that it actually affected the image too. And there are 2 ways you can kind of go about this, but I'm going to show you the first way that I would like to go about this. I'm going to take off that padding. And what I would like to do then is I know the padding only needs to apply to all this content down here. And I'll actually name this real quick so it'll make it easier to see the layers in the future. But since I know all of this is going to have the padding, we will call this content. And I can give it its padding now, but it looks broken. That's because when you create new frames of auto layout within an auto layout frame, remember it sets it to hug first. It doesn't set it to fill, it doesn't set it to fix with, it always hugs the content. I'm going to reset this to fill container, and I also have to set that for everything within. Some people like to click through like into the frame and select all the things, and then you could select fill container. A tip that I highly recommend whenever you're doing anything with auto layout is if you have a frame selected, in this case, the content frame, if you hit enter on your keyboard, it automatically selects everything within that frame. So in this case, it's these 3 elements. If it was the whole card frame, it would be the image, it would be this chip, it would be the content frame. So it's just an easier way to dive down in the layers than actually going through and clicking through every single one of those layers to get through what you want. Another little tip is if I wanted this icon down here, if you hold Control or Command on your keyboard, then it actually ignores every single layer and jumps down to the most bottom thing in that layer. So in this case, it would be this text, and it jumps right to that. That's another little tip that I very much enjoy, and it's almost hard to use auto layout without using your Control or Command keyboard sometimes, because you don't want to have to click maybe upwards of 10 times into a container just to get to text. You just hit that Command Control and it makes it much easier. We're pretty much finished up here. I have my card, but I have some funky spacing going on here, and that's because this is set to a fixed height. Right now, I'll bring it to a hug, and you can see, well, it's stuck here on the bottom. So I know I need some padding over here, and I'll stick that with 16 pixels. And I don't actually need any space between this image and this text. I could have an additional 8 pixels, but I think it looks fine without any. And here's your card. The only thing that you're really missing here is rounded corners. So if I add that on, clips the content, which means rather than this being square, because it's not registering that image within that container, it just clips that off, rounds it all off, and it's nice and pretty. Now you have your container, your card, where if I get this out of the way from over there, I can now shrink and expand this, and everything behaves how I want it to. That's because this does have the space between. This is set to fill, that's set to fill, that's set to fill, and this is in the absolute positioning. So kind of incorporating all of those basics, and I hope that gives you a fair understanding of how to kind of navigate frames, make frames, and kind of orient them between fixed and hug and things like that. But if you do have questions, I can answer some more.
Yes. There's one that is, will the card also grow vertically as you enter more content?
So right now, since this text, let's say, I'll start with this text example. Since this is set to hug, if I actually enter in, you can see everything falls below. If I wanted to add in, I'll just draw a rectangle, but if I wanted to add in another section, this is where I would use that command control key as well, and that drops it into the frame. You can hover, but it works a lot better if you hold that command control. If I drop that in and fix to the fill container, you can see everything adjusts automatically as well.
All right,
And
there's
that's because it's all set to hug again.
Yeah, there's a question about cropping the image.
Cropping the image.
Yeah, like is there a way to make the coffee bean image crop on larger image instead of skew?
Instead of view?
Skew, I guess, like it must look skewed to them. Or Eric, do you want to say what you're, explain the question a little bit?
Yeah, I was just meaning to say that, like, right now when you make your card larger, the beans kind of like stretch and grow to fit the screen. But instead, if that canvas was larger, but it just like kind of masked, instead of like growing the beans in size, it just like was able to stretch and include more of the cropped image.
I think I understand what you're saying. I will say, so this is an example of an image that I got from Unsplash, put in here. If let's say if I crop this image a little bit smaller and I swap that out in here, you can see that it actually changes the behavior of how that image functions. That's one thing I haven't gotten, let's say, a grasp of why. I know it does that. So if you start to mess with images after you put them into Figma by cropping or anything else, it actually starts to skew the image itself rather than expanding or decreasing the content in that image. Does that make sense?
You originally had a larger image and then you cropped it and then brought it back in and it skewed more so. But I feel like it always is skewing the image or scaling the beans to be larger or smaller, right?
Kind of. They're just slightly different. Like this one zooms into an image basically.
Oh, I
and
see.
This one pulls and skews it. So just a little different depending on how you use your images. In most cases, you could pull in an image, you could set the size and base your card around that. And then you could also adjust it by holding all of the dimensions so that you don't skew the image and go off of that. So there's other routes to kind of work around it. But no matter what, you can also, I guess, rather than having auto layout, you could leave that image be and just expand a bottom section. But I think no matter what in auto layout, this would be skewed with a fill container, because if I had it fixed, you could kind of do that. But does that make sense?
So in your example, it zoomed in and out of the beans instead of stretching them like you did, and I missed it. How did it make it so that it was stretching the image and making it like kind of pixelated?
You're saying this example is making it pixelated?
No. In your initial like demonstration, it seemed to work totally flawlessly. It zoomed in and out, right?
Oh yeah.
But then you said if you were to do something, it starts skewing the image instead.
Yeah, if you were to take this image, so this image was unedited, it was directly pasted into Figma.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you tweak that image in Figma by cropping it in any kind of way, that's when you start to get the weird image situations. That's where you get the skew.
So if you were going to crop an image, you have to do it in Photoshop or wherever first. Before
Correct.
you crop it in. Okay, good to know. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So there is another question, and the question is, why use absolute position for the 52 likes instead of putting 52 likes and the coffee image in a frame together and then aligning 52 likes in the top right-hand corner of that frame?
That is a great question. And I think that kind of boils down to a little bit of preference. I try to use as few containers or frames as I possibly can. And that could be done through this absolute position. I could absolutely put this in its own standard frame. Whoops. I have to get rid of this. But I could put this in its own frame and then position, say, that 52 likes, this one in the top right. That is one way to do it, and it is fine. It's just an added layer, so you would know that, hey, this is another frame with these things compared to in the entire card. You can see, all right, I have an image, I have the content, and I have the absolute position likes. I think either works, and you can still have this set to fill container, and you can still do the same thing. The only difference is now you're having to worry with constraints a little bit more, rather than just a fill container. So just a little more smaller tweaks achieves the same result, but slightly different. Anything else?
Let's see. There was a follow-up on the question, would it be ideal to think of how it might be developed when you're making that decision?
Yes, so that is a good question. And when it comes to these being developed, I personally, one of the things I actually do really like about auto layout is you are beginning to go beyond just what you see visually designing. So if I, for an example here, if I had a search bar and I had maybe a target icon and a button, something very simple here. If I threw all of these in a frame, I said, oh, I want you to be in the top right corner or top left corner. I want you to be centered, and this guy will go way over here. All you are telling developers in a situation like this is these belong in these positions. But when you go beyond and put these in an auto layout, you're saying, hey, I may always want these to be this far apart. Or let's say I always want this search bar to fill up the container with 16 pixels of padding on both sides. And I want it to do that because now when I adjust things, it's basically giving a little bit more into that behavior. So you're getting more, rather than into just visually what the design looks like, you're actually specifying a little bit further into how that behaves on the dev side. That answer the question all right?
Yes, looks like you did.
Perfect. Anything else before I move on into a couple more examples?
I think you're good to go.
All right. I'll go into another, I guess, smaller examples here. I put together, we'll start with, these are just components right now. There's nothing really complicated about them. There's no states or variants or things like that. They're just for easy pulling into this file. I'd like to go over something that, at least for me as a designer, is a bit of a pain point when it comes to designs, and that is tables. Tables are a little bit painful if I just had these all, let's say on a page here. These are all my cells. If I had them like this individually, no auto layout. Anytime I actually adjusted anything in here with content, because you can have just a standard view design, and then oftentimes product or others will like to see content filled in realistically what that would look like. So if I had typed this out, a really long label that doesn't mean anything, you can see, yes, this component, this cell individually has its own auto layout that's determining the behavior. We want this to stack vertically. But none of these change at all. And so I would have to go into my file, take all of these, adjust the heights. If we had auto layout, put these all in one, we say we want these to all be level, I can now specify these other data table cells. Height-wise, I want them to always fill my container. So anytime I ever change this text, if I delete that much, it actually aligns automatically. So if you get somebody that says, hey, I want a really long label to see the wrapping behavior of your rows, well, look at that. Your row behaved exactly how you wanted it to. And this one, we'll go back to just table. And you can see now I can have this whole thing in its own frame. And this is a whole data table frame. I'll actually duplicate this, make this look more like a table. I'll change the fill to maybe like a tan and give it a black border. That's going to be our header. Anytime you need to add more rows, you just duplicate your rows. And something about tables is devs actually tend to build them in rows rather than columns. You can add more rows to this. You can add longer data to make it expand. And you can actually take everything in here, change it to fill container, and now change all of this to fill. And then you also need to change all of the cells themselves to fill. Now I can take this whole container and say, hey, I want this to fill out more of the page. And all of those cells increase. And it's so much faster and it's more consistent than having to go through and make all of these changes yourself. It's all done very quickly. And once you get the hang of it, it becomes easier. And in some cases, maybe since this is a really long label over here, I can actually say, hey, I want this guy. Well, I want all of these actually to still be that fill, but I want all of these, let's say, I'm just clicking through each of these to specify that I want all of these to have their fixed width instead. And the reason I can do that is, hey, maybe I only ever want the regular cells to be 160 pixels long. Like I forgot to adjust that one, 160. And this one will only stretch with the container. So as that grows, that one will only grow with the rest. Tables become a lot easier this way. And they do specify, again, that behavior a little bit easier. It'll save you so much time, I promise. It saves a lot of time. Another example I'll jump into actually helps maybe designers. So this is a slider component. And if I were a designer and I pulled this into my file, I could say, hey, I want a label, let's just call this, I don't know, vehicles or something. And we have 200,500, I guess. This is a chip. Everything, because it's an auto layout, adjusts to the right sizing. This slider, if I detach this component, because otherwise I can't actually change this. This is set to a fixed height or fixed width, sorry. I can't manipulate this. But if I do detach this component, this would be an instance where I would want to. I could take that slider and say, well, if I have 200,000, maybe my inventory for vehicles is, let's say 300,000 or something. I can drag this slider exactly where I want it. And now this is a lot easier on the designer side because I don't have to pick out, hey, I want this to move this distance and I need to move this circle on top of it, and it becomes quicker. So what I'm really getting at is just making things easier and faster with auto layout. And it will take some practice. It is a lot up front to kind of get the hang of, but as you work your way into it a little bit more and a little bit more, and you make mistakes and you learn, I promise it'll come on a lot faster than you think it might. I would like to open the floor to a couple more questions, and then I wanted to get into a final example of kind of wrapping this up, how everything can look all together.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question, silly question too. So when you, let's say if you are selecting 2, 3 items or components, and you wanted to add the auto layout, do you group them first and then you apply the auto layout, or you click the Shift A, or what do you do? Or frame, or how do you basically group 3 things, 4 things together to apply that auto layout to that section, to that grouping? Thank you.
You're welcome, and good question. I'll pull together 3 data cells here for an example. I basically select everything I would like in that auto layout frame, and I don't actually need to group anything. I don't need to put anything in a normal frame. All I do is select Shift A, and it's automatically in my auto layout frame. And here's where I would go and manipulate all the things that I want. So I know with data tables, I don't want any spacing. I want those things to be stuck together, and I don't need any padding, but I could do that. I could give it a weird background color for now. Well, you can't really see that one. You can give it a background color, but you don't necessarily need to take any other steps other than just putting it into an auto layout frame.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
There is a question in the chat on the table selection. Is picking a whole column possible rather than individual cells?
The only way to pick a whole column is to actually build it out into a vertical column alignment rather than these rows. I can show what that would look like. In this case, I just made detach all of my auto layouts. So now this is nothing but cells in here. I would basically build that by saying, hey, you're one column, and I'm just hitting Shift A on each of these selections. You're one column. And then I would take the entire thing and combine it into the one table auto layout. Now, what you would have to do in here is take your columns. You would have to do your fill containers, or let's say in this case, just this one, I want to fill the container. And I still have to select, again, all of the cells have to fill the container. And this will behave in the same way, but this is where you start to get problems with tables, or I guess really anything with columns, is you can get that uneven spacing when you shrink it. And that's when the rows are a little bit more helpful. The way you would fix this, I guess, is you would have to come in here and you could either specify all of these to whatever this number is for your height. So in this case, it's 56 pixels. So I could say, hey, you're 56, but you could kind of see how that would get troublesome over time. It just takes a little bit more time, but now it's all nice and neat. So that's one way you could do it. But other than that, there's not quite another way to correct behavior like that when it starts to grow in length, because you can't say, I want, well, I guess you could say this fills the container. Oops, this fills the container. But you can see these aren't necessarily changing all that much until you select then each of these to fill the container. Then you can pick out those individual cells again and say, you fill the container. The only thing really, really problematic with that is you're only specifying that for this row. So for some reason, if this one, let me copy this text. Oops. This one had a really long label now. I would then have to go and re-specify all of these to fill the container. So it just gets a little nitpicky over time compared to sticking with a row layout. Anything else before I show that final example?
I think
All
you're good to
right.
go.
Cool. I'll end it off with a big example of lots of different auto layout things. And I will share this file. If not, I'll copy this into a different file. But my goal is to share this single file with you guys. You guys can view, go through here, maybe copy things into your own file and explore when you have more time. But this is an example of Target's website. You have in this giant, let me scroll up so you can see these layers here. In this giant auto layout frame, you have navigations, you have content. Within navigations, you have top level, you have the normal. But basically, what I wanted to showcase is because everything here is auto layouted, it has all of the principles that I've explained and we've spoken about. This has the auto resizing. If I ever got any new requirements, any new updates, anything in the future, or any small changes, I feel very comfortable coming into this and changing things, because let's say they didn't want registry as a title anymore. Maybe they wanted, I'm just going to say something weird, like note cards. I could come in and that automatically adjusted. It kept all of the same pixel distances, the spacing. I didn't have to really change anything other than the text. Maybe instead over here, topics again changed to, let's see, I'll just put random. This search bar, I don't know if you noticed, but that automatically changed with the fill. So no matter what this text is here, I'm very comfortable knowing that behavior is just shifting over that and everything else remains the same, because I've specified all of these are hug. They're always going to hug these things, because when that content changed, I want that size to change, and I only want this to fill. I also always want these to be 40 pixels away, but that's just a detail. Another example real quick is, let's say these were images on both sides of this, but they say they only want images on the left. I could just delete this, and this is now automatically adjusted. I didn't have to change anything myself. It just did it itself. And you have examples of cards in here. You have examples of using the absolute positioning. You have the automatic spacing. You have some that fill the container rather than automatic spacing, because sometimes I may want this text to go that far and then drop down below rather than running into it. So I've specified, hey, in this container, I want you to fill this, but only up until 24 pixels away from those images. I will copy this file, put it in the chat so you guys can actually just go through and grab this all and explore it if you want. But it looks like we're at the hour marker. I'll take any last few questions. If not, thank you so much for spending some time with me and learning auto layout. And hopefully you start to use some in your practice.
We're all clapping for you. Are there any, well, there was a question. Hold on, I missed it. Is there a concept like max width or max height?
I would love for that to be the next update. That's something I've wanted from day one. They don't have that because there's been instances where I have thought that would be great, but they don't have that. So not yet, hopefully in the future. But yeah, thank you for asking.
And then you can also send me the link to this and I can put it in UX and ATX's Slack channel as well for anyone that doesn't quickly grab it from the chat here.
Thank
I
you.
take it you're doing that already, right?
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing so that you don't see a lot of permissions here, but
Are there any final questions? How did Nathan do? Did y'all like that? Yeah, get some thumbs up. He's going to come back and do it again. Any votes for what you want him to talk about? They just want everything.
yeah. This should be the file, by the way.
I saw a vote for components and variants. That was
Components and variants.
exactly what we were thinking. Yes.
I can absolutely
right.
do that.
All
Also,
right. And then
I did see
go
a
ahead.
quick question. How did I reach the master level? Just years of practicing. Anytime something new comes out, have the passion, give it a try. If it doesn't make sense, look up videos. There's plenty out there. Some people may explain it even better than I do. But if you put in a little bit of time on the outside of work, it'll treat you well.
All right. Well, we'll give you a final round of applause. Thank you so much. This was great. We'll get you to drop that link in the chat. For my students who are going back to my class, I will bring you the link if you want to go ahead and drop off now, and I'll meet you in class. All right.
Thank you again, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.